Oh my God, he on X Games mode.
Iris, green.
I'm a man. I jump man. Wonderful. 3 feet in, 3 feet out.
The NBA and the Players Association have formalized their plans for Orlando. This is now officially happening. We are good because basketball is back. And Stephen A., when games restart on July 31st, we will have...
After over 100 days of speculation, uncertainty, terrible Instagram posts, and no basketball, the NBA season is returning. Last month, the NBA announced that on July 31st, the season will be making its long-awaited return. Well, maybe. After months of negotiating, NBA executives worked with GMs, owners, and players to come to a new finalized start date, and 3 more months of NBA basketball that may look very different than what we are accustomed to. But as optimistic as things are looking, there are still some obstacles to overcome. For the remainder of the season, the NBA will feature 13 teams from the Western Conference and 9 teams from the Eastern Conference, basically telling the other 8 teams to get lost. Of these 22 teams that have been given a shot at the playoffs, each team has a vastly different schedule. From the Raptors, who have arguably the toughest set of remaining games, to the Pelicans, who have a schedule that looks a bit odd. The Blazers, who are 1 spot ahead of the Pelicans, have a schedule that features 7 games against top 15 teams. The Pelicans' remaining schedule features just 3. And if we look at other teams in the West that are on the brink of a playoff spot, their schedules are vastly more difficult than the Pelicans as well. What does this mean? It means that the NBA is conspiring to get their new up-and-coming poster boy into the playoffs by any means necessary. Or, as the NBA insists, the remaining schedules are based off of the games each team had left before the break. Oh, right. Either way, it doesn't make a difference to me. I'm just glad to see that the NBA will be returning. In their official statement, the NBA stated that the remainder of the games will be played in a figurative bubble at the ESPN complex at Walt Disney World near Orlando, Florida, where NBA players and staff will be isolated with all the amenities they will need for what may be up to 2.5 months. The league has set up practice facilities and game courts that look eerily similar to 2K's anti-up courts, missing the opportunity to call this facility the ballroom. You get it? Like, because they're playing basketball. The NBA also stated that, of course, there will be no live audience, and instead, the league may pump artificial crowd noise into the arenas using 2K's crowd audio. Alright, bucko. We're about 2 bad decisions away from this whole thing being one big 2K simulation. But any sort of crowd noise might be better than none. If you've ever heard some of the chirping that gets picked up from the mics during normal NBA games, you'd understand the NBA's concern with having absolutely no crowd noise at all.
Playoff game, and he's driving all the way down. On an 8 his technique coming trying to get an up work on.
Hell no. Trash.
But whatever the NBA decides to do, I'm all for it. It's different, it's exciting. But in just the past few weeks since the NBA announced its plan to return, there have been some major hiccups. Aside from Stephen A. Smith suggesting that NBA players will not be able to go without certain recreational activities, there are some serious concerns with the NBA's plan. After testing the 302 players that will be competing once the season resumes, a total of 25 tests came back positive for Rona. 25! That's 8.2% of all players that are set to play in Orlando. 3 of those 25 positive tests came from players on the Pelicans, which brought into question whether head coach Alvin Gentry should even join the team once the season returns. Other players that have tested positive include Spencer Dinwiddie, DeAndre Jordan, Malcolm Brogdon, Buddy Hield, and Nikola Jokic. Once the season resumes and all players and staff have entered the bubble, if a player tests positive for Rona, they will have to enter self-isolation for 2 weeks. Could you imagine if a superstar tested positive and had to sit out for at least 2 weeks? That can easily be the deciding factor for an entire playoff series. And even crazier, within this bubble, the NBA will be implementing video technology to track players at all times. If a player within the bubble tests positive, the NBA will use this tracking technology to see who the player has been in contact with. So, in other words, although the NBA is doing everything within its power to make sure no one who has the virus gets in before they're medically cleared, if anyone with the virus slips through the cracks and enters the bubble, this entire plan could fall apart. But the virus isn't the only thing keeping players from coming back when the season returns. Some players have chose to willingly opt out of returning this season, including Victor Oladipo, Trevor Ariza, Avery Bradley, and Davis Bertans, bringing the total percentage of players who may not be returning to over 10%, or the equivalent of 2 entire teams worth of NBA players. But now that we've covered all the negative, let's talk about the positive, baby. I mean, not positive, but let's just move on. One new feature regarding the remaining of the NBA season will be a play-in tournament for the playoffs. Normally, the 8 teams with the best records in each conference will make the playoffs. But in Orlando, the NBA is planning on having a play-in tournament for the 8th spot in the playoffs. If the 8th seed is more than 4 games ahead of the 9th seed, there will be no play-in tournament. But if the 8th seed is 4 games or fewer ahead of the 9th seed, there will be a best-of-2 series to decide who will get the 8th spot in the playoffs. So the 9th seed will have to win 2 head-to-head matchups against the 8th seed in order to get a spot in the postseason. Now, one change I personally think the NBA should experiment with during this unusual circumstance is different camera angles. Throughout the years, the league has played around with some interesting camera angles that really bring the game to life and give fans a more immersed experience. Like this courtside angle from the 2001 All-Star Game. Angles like this give a better perspective on just how fast the game is played in the NBA and just how massive some of these guys really are. But other than some audio adjustments and a possible play-in tournament, pretty much everything else about the NBA season will remain the same. And whatever the results of this crazy season is, we are set to witness history. If the Lakers win, Anthony Davis and Dwight Howard will get their first ring, and LeBron will get his 4th. And if LeBron manages to win Finals MVP, he will be the first player in NBA history to win the award for 3 different teams. If the Clippers win the championship, it will be the first time in the history of the franchise. Then again, if the Clippers get to the conference finals this season, that will also be a first for the franchise. Of course, if the Clippers win, this will be Paul George's first ring, and if Kawhi wins Finals MVP, he will also become the first player to win the award for 3 different teams. If the Bucks win the championship this season, it will be Giannis Antetokounmpo's first ring. And if Giannis wins regular season MVP this year, which he should and will, he will be just the 11th player in league history to win league MVP and Finals MVP in the same season. But here's where things get really interesting. At the moment, Giannis has the best odds of winning Defensive Player of the Year. Now, the league loves parity, so he may not actually win the award. But if Giannis pulls away in the DPOY race, he can potentially win regular season MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, a championship, and Finals MVP, all in the same season. Although this theoretical situation does have a lot of ifs, the only real question mark lies on him leading the Bucks to a championship. Because up to this point, Giannis has piled up one of the best seasons ever. And if he can cap it off with a Finals MVP, Giannis may end this season as the best single season in NBA history. Now, I would mention other teams, but quite frankly, the odds of any other team even sniffing a championship this season is very, very unlikely. So, if you want to make 10 grand off of a $10 investment, then put your faith in Bradley Beal and the Wizards. But if you're not a degenerate gambler, just sit back and enjoy what may be the most eventful finale to any NBA season we've ever seen. Hopefully everything goes according to plan and Zion makes the season returns on schedule. Hope you all enjoyed, and as always, until next time.